So thanks everyone for for joining this session about the changes in India's national education policy that just came out late last week. We are thrilled that we are being joined by Vineet Gupta, one of the most eminent educators in the country, someone who's been really driving changes since 2007 when he was one of the founders of Ashoka University, and most recently he has also founded and he's a trustee of Laksha University. So someone who has been at the helm of driving liberal arts in the country since 2007, and now we see the education policy pretty much moving in the direction of multidisciplinary education. I think this is going to make for a great conversation. So before we jump into speak with Vineet and get his perspectives, I just wanted to really run you down through the highlights of what the education policy is. In light of who is joining us today, who are primary audiences, I'm going to focus more on the higher education side of things, although I will run you through what are the changes expected on the school side. Before I jump into it, I do want to tell you that it's a very detailed document that has been issued by the ministry. It's a 62-page document. It's really heavy. Honestly, as I reviewed it and about half an hour ago, my palms were sweating because I was like, do I really remember all the things that are in it? And possibly not. So I'm going to keep it high level. The highlights that I thought that I have included in the presentation are things that I thought you'd be more interested to hear, but please know this is not comprehensive. So let me really quickly now go through this. So the background, basically this policy is changing literally after 34 years. So till now, the national policy that was being used was the one that came into account in 1986. There were slight tweaks in it in 1992, but predominantly, this was a policy that was designed when India was very different, in a very different space. Today, when so many private schools, private universities have come into the picture, we're talking about digital learning. It really came to the fore, in terms of the process, so which was really begun in 2015 by the government. So since 2015, to run you through it, the policy, the initial committee that was put together, they put a draft policy together in 2016, which was reviewed. It was again consulted against the chairmanship of Dr. Kasturi Rangan, and there was another draft that came out in 2019, which was translated in 22 languages. It was put up there for the public to opine on. This thing was got really a lot of feedback at the grassroots level, wherein they involved 250,000 gram panchayats. That's really the self-governance bodies at the village level. So the policy that has come in, which was approved by the Union Cabinet on the 29th of July, has been really tested, has gotten feedback right at the base level, at the grassroots level. So kudos to the government for doing such a detailed job on it. It is going to come down to a lot of implementation, because it's a really different policy from what exists currently, and you will know what I mean when we dive into the details, both from a school and a higher education standpoint. So what does the policy really entail? There are I mentioned a 62-page report. It is divided into 4 key sections. The first one details out the changes at the school education level. The second one deals with higher education. There are other key areas of focus which deal with professional education, adult education, promotion of Indian languages, art and culture, how technology is going to be used, digital education. And then finally, the last 2 pages are talking about the implementation, how to make it happen. And I'm sure when we discuss that with Vineet, we're going to dive into it at a very broad level. Before we dive into the details, this is what I thought were the major changes. So the biggest change was that the ministry today, which is called MHRD, is going to be correctly renamed or aptly renamed Ministry of Education. The government is trying to get the gross enrollment ratio up to 50% by 2035. Right now, this gross enrollment ratio stands at about half of that. The focus is going to be on holistic and multidisciplinary education. And as I go through the slides, you're going to listen to multidisciplinary possibly more times than you would want to, but that is the essence of all the changes that are being made. There are also going to be multiple entry and exit points for students, and I'll delve into it a bit later. The policy also talks about credits and credit transfers. Now, this is something that was not existent in the Indian education system. And for all of you who are joining us from the United States, it's going to make things very easy or very similar from a system that exists on the US side. There's also a section that talks about internationalization, which, from a credit standpoint, they also talk about credits being transferred over to a foreign university and vice versa. So know that the system that is being proposed is really something that will be in alignment with many of the foreign institutions. And then finally, in terms of the key highlights for me, there was this talk about multidisciplinary education and research universities, talking about the ability of a student to take up majors and minors. Again, something we are very well versed with on the US side, but something that doesn't exist on the India side. So school education. I use this diagram that was in the report, which according to me really classifies what the major difference is. So today, what exists in India is a 10+2 system, which really talks about education from ages 6 through age 18, and many of you are familiar with that. The biggest change was that they spoke about changing the 10+2 structure to a 5+3+3+4. And now the ages are covered are from 3 years to 18 years. So the formalization of the schooling or preschooling, I should say, for ages 3 to 6, which there's a decent section in the report that identifies why it is so important to have formal schooling, at that age in the initial ages of 3 to 6. That was one of the biggest change. So basically, that initial 5 years is going to be foundational school from ages 3 to 8. Then comes ages 8 to 11, and that's going to be preparatory school. Ages 11 to 14, class 6 to 8 is going to be middle school, very much like we have here in the US. And classes 9 to 12 is going to be secondary school, which is what we call high school out here. So that was, one of the key changes. The focus for the school education was really on basic literacy and numeracy in grades 1 to 3. So that is what the government is hoping that we can achieve, and really a key investment in early childhood education. From a gross enrollment ratio, you may remember I spoke about trying to get to 50% overall by 2035, but at a schooling level, the aim is to really get to 100% gross enrollment ratio by 2030, and to bring back children who have actually dropped out of schooling. There's about 20 million children who have dropped out of schooling, and the idea was to bring them all back. The other key piece was the focus on vocational education, which will start from class 6. And there was also a key mention about investment in coding, an opportunity for kids to start learning coding at age 6. We have seen that on the in China, but it's great that that has been incorporated, and there's a great emphasis on vocational education. The report, just so you know, spoke about how vocational education in India, only 5% of Indian students actually do that, versus there was a specific mention of US, where 50% of students get vocational education, and in Germany about 75%. So the idea is to move in that direction. The other key piece was the focus on reduction in curriculum content. The report actually did emphasize that in the past there has been a focus on rote learning, and they want to move away from that. Even in terms of tests and board exams that have been happening, the report basically said that the intense pressure that the student currently faces with board exams, that is going to be reduced. The system is going to be made more flexible. Till grade 5, much of the education will be recommended in the mother tongue or the regional language, so that students they really don't drop out of school. Things are being done so that the student is comfortable staying in the system, and in light of the fact that they want to take the gross enrollment ratio all the way to 100%. So from a school standpoint, and just to add, in terms of the board exams, one of the key pieces was also that the board exams would be held twice a year, and also there will be separate exams that are conducted in grades 3, 5, and 8, just to make sure that the core concepts have been absorbed by the student. So those were the key highlights, and I'm going to quickly run through the rest in the interest of time. At the higher education level, the idea was, the focus was holistic and multidisciplinary undergraduate education. The policy really talks about transforming the current higher education institutions into large multidisciplinary universities with clusters of over 3,000 students each. So they really want to grow the sizes of the universities and make them multidisciplinary. Undergraduate education, we saw the coming back of the 4-year degree, which you may remember the government had started doing that in 2013, but had stepped away. Now there is another emphasis on a 4-year degree with research, with an emphasis on research. There are different designs of master's programs that are going to be available. A person who has done a 3-year bachelor's degree will be able to do a 2-year master's. Or if you've done a 4 years bachelor's degree, you'll be able to do a 1-year master's, or there'll be also integrated programs. The key piece of, you remember I spoke about the multiple entry and exit. In the past, if you were an undergraduate student, and let's say for some personal reasons you had to drop out of college after 2 years, you did not have anything to show for the 2 years that you had invested in higher education. So one big change that is happening is, if you actually come out after 1 year of undergraduate education, you're going to get a certificate. If you come out after 2 years, you are going to get a diploma. So much like the associate's degree here in the US. If you come out after 3 years, you are going to get a degree. And then there is a 4-year degree option with research, that is set up. So the idea is to help the students stay in the system, and even if they have to drop out for some reason, earn the credits, earn a certificate, earn a diploma, so that there is something to show, for the time that they had already invested in education. There'll be a National Research Foundation that will be set up, and the idea is to really drive research culture in the country. There'll be a single regulator, which will be the Higher Education Commission of India, that will be set up, and under that there'll be 4 verticals, that will focus on accreditation or funding or regulation or standard setting. So, but the key thing is they'll be all under one regulatory body. There'll be similar set of norms that'll be set for both public and private institutions, which is great, so that regardless of where the student is going, whether they are enrolled at a public or a private institution, they will be subject to the same norms. The one other big piece that is being changed is you may know that there are 45,000. There are 1,000 universities and there are 45,000 colleges that are affiliated to these universities. So that affiliation is actually going to be phased out over the years. And the idea is that each of those colleges, based on the accreditation that they would have, will get academic and financial, they become an autonomous body. So that is another key piece that is being, showcased there. I'm gonna really quickly go through the internationalization piece, because that is probably what people on this call are most interested in. So the vision is to have a large number of international students coming to India from international countries. So the idea is that Indian institutions would be able to offer a premier education at a low cost, so that international students can come to the country, and also make the system such that if Indian students want to go abroad, they are able to transfer credits, and also because they are doing liberal arts kind of education, that their education would be very transferable. So the idea is to promote exchange, both at a faculty and a student level, drive research and teaching collaborations. The higher education institutions in India were suggested to have an international students office, just like we have whether in US or UK, there's an office that takes care of their for example, the visa pieces or counseling pieces. That will be set up at the higher education level. And there was a specific mention that the top 100 global universities will be facilitated to operate in India, and then high-performing Indian universities will be encouraged to set up campuses in other countries. So, I'm sure we'll hear from Vineet, about this. Again, vocational training was front and center in terms of the other things of focus. There was increased access for disadvantaged students. There was also a mention of increased support for gifted students. There'll be e-content in regional languages. There was a lot of talk about technology, use of technology and digital education, with a key thing, that the education spend be increased to 6% of GDP from the current 4.43%. So, in the, and I have gone 20 minutes. I thought I'd initially only do 15. So I've already gone over what I thought I was going to do. So as you can see, the policy is very detailed. Lots and lots of changes that are being recommended at the school and higher education level. But with the key piece being really the focus of being holistic and multidisciplinary in nature. So again, I'd be glad to share. There was a link, as you may have seen in the first slide, to the entire policy if you want to take a look. And we will also take your questions. So hopefully, if you have any questions of some things that we couldn't get to, we'll be happy to take that. So at this time, I would love to get Vineet, on. Again, as I mentioned, we are really thrilled to have one of the leading educators in the country, somebody who's been so deeply involved in setting up high quality institutions, liberal arts institutions, multidisciplinary in nature, something that the policy is going towards. I would love to have Vineet on and really ask him, there are so many things that are happening with the policy, but what, according to him, are his top 5 or 6 key takeaways? We would love to hear that, Vineet.
Thank you, Swaraj, and thank you for inviting me. I'm presuming most of the audience is in the US, so good morning, friends. Well, I'm assuming since most of the audience is interested in higher education, so I'll make one comment about school education, then quickly transition to higher education. I think Swaraj has covered the policy extremely well in very careful detail. And maybe I can talk a little bit about the intent and the implications. So on school education, I think the broad intent being India has had almost 100% gross enrollment ratio at the primary level. But I think the criticism or the challenge in India has been that the learning outcomes have been very poor. So when students are finishing grade 3, the question to really ask is how many of them can read to learn, or how many of them are ready, right? And that's the grade 3 is normally when you would expect that students are ready to read and then they can go on and really build on their education. Similarly, after grade 5, can people do simple math? Grade 8. So the focus of the policy is a lot on learning outcomes at various stages, whether at grade 3, grade 5, grade 8, and then finally as students finish their school education. So if you really see the focus, that's the area, that's really the intent. I think in terms of structure, the 12 years of school still remains 12, so that's not changing. There is strong focus on the elementary side, right? Ages 3 to 6, that's when you sort of start building your cognitive skills, etc. So there is focus on the elementary preparation and really a lot of focus on learning outcomes. I mean, that's the way I tend to see, right? And of course, a lot will depend on how it's implemented. And of course, related to that is the point that Swaraj made, that the endeavor is that these 20 million people who've gone out of, students in India are dropping out of grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. And then we are not sort of measuring what's happening to them. So get these 20 million students back into school. So that's the focus of the school education. Now, if I come to higher education, I think the big one, the big one, and I want to really interpret that in numbers, is the bold declaration that India will have gross enrollment ratio by 2035, which is 15 years from now. And I really want to decluster it in terms of numbers. India today has about 31 million people in higher education, maybe 32. That's the United States, just for comparison, is around 22 million. That's what my research suggests. So we are already far ahead in terms of number of people in college. We are second in the world after China. China has the highest number of people in college. But even at these numbers of 32 million, we are still 1 in 4 students going to college. Out of whatever we would like to send, or whoever is eligible to go to college, we are able to send only 1 in 4. Now, the policy says this should become 1 in 2 by 2035, which means we have to double, more than double, and I'll tell you why. Because India has a very young population. Our population in the age group of 10 to 19 is actually the highest in the world. It's far more even than China. So if the GER, the gross enrollment ratio, has to grow from 25% to 50%, we actually have to more than double our capacity. So with the 31 million people already in higher education, we have to create capacity for another 40 million, not just another 31 million, which means that twice the number of students that already go to college in United States. That's the sort of capacity we have to create in the next 15 years, right? So to me, I think that is really, really the bold statement. And for everybody in higher education anywhere in the world, that is really the number to watch out. India, as Swaraj said, has 1,000 universities, 45,000 colleges. So we have to more than double whatever we've done in the last 70 years pre-independence. That was very, very low. But we have to more than double it in the next 15 years. We have to add higher education capacity twice the size of the United States in the next 15 years. And that to me is really, really the opportunity in some sense, right? As an educator, as somebody who's been involved in building institutions, to me, this scale of this challenge and the boldness of this statement is deeply exciting. Sometimes it gets missed in just that one line stating, look, GER will move to 50, but what does it mean in terms of numbers? So huge opportunity in that sense to create great institutions for curriculum, for education providers, for internationalization. I think that the scale, so India is really going to be the place for higher education in the next 15 years, if we were to really believe our policy. The second, I think the second big one on higher education is, I think, and Swaraj has already used the term, there is multidisciplinary really used all over. But, and where is this coming from? Indian universities, if you see the ancient Indian universities, Takshashila, Nalanda, they were pure, they were the best form of broad liberal arts based, what a broad-based liberal arts education should be. And in fact, the policy quotes India's Sanskrit scholar, Bana Bhatta, and he writes in his book Katambari that an educated person is somebody who knows 64 kalas. So kalas meaning in India like art forms, right? And this is not the art form, not really implying only dance and painting, but also mathematics, chemistry. It means professional education like engineering, medicine. So a pure liberal arts education in the best form, not just restricted to the humanities, social sciences and sciences, but really getting in all forms of professional education, education in the disciplines, art forms. So that's the traditional notion of what higher education in India was maybe 2000 years ago. Now that changed, and post-independence in 1947, after that, the focus of Indian higher education was really in developing these siloed institutions. So we've, for example, set up these Indian Institutes of Technology, which are world-renowned, have done an excellent job. The Indian Institutes of Management, which are just focused on management. The Indian Institutes of Science, Education and Research, which are focused just on science. So these siloed institutions, which are outstanding and excellent and attract some of the best talent from India. So there is a shift. There's a big shift when now the policy says, look, institutions of higher learning need to be multidisciplinary, right? This siloed approach of only technology, only management, or only that, this needs to change. In fact, it goes on to say that even institutions like the IITs should become multidisciplinary, right? So that's a huge shift, which will mean that there will be a lot of reinvention, there will be a lot of redoing, a lot of churn in the way present universities and higher education institutions in India are. So these are, I think, great opportunities for collaboration, great opportunities for universities, for tie-ups and universities to come in. So I think the move back to the traditional notion of a broad-based liberal arts education, which I do feel the West, I sometimes find the US universities are now moving in that direction, where you see some professional education starting to come into liberal arts colleges, or some. So I think that notion of a very broad-based liberal education encompassing the pure disciplines, professional education, art forms, languages, I think there is a move towards that, and that will take a lot of doing, because in the last 70 years, Indian institutions were moving in a more siloed approach. So that to me, I think, is a big reform and a big statement. Now, third, and which probably is most relevant to this audience, is the whole piece on internationalization, right? I do feel there again will be great opportunities for exchange. There will be great opportunities for students coming back and forth. Of course, the big announcement there is for India to become the home for higher education for people in the world, right? In fact, it uses the Hindi term Vishwa Guru, and some of you who can understand Hindi, Vishwa means world, Guru means teacher, right? So the world teacher. So the aspiration being that Indian universities become world, sort of become the place where students come from all over the world to be taught, right? So that's the aspiration, again, huge in terms of its scope, reach, ambition. How much of that happens, one has to see. But clearly, India does possess the human capital to make it possible. There are huge challenges of infrastructure, of regulation, but that's the aspiration. That's the aspiration of the policy. So, for India to really become a leader in higher education and have students coming from all over, but it's also equally progressive in terms of Indian students being able to go out. For the first time, there has been a lot of talk in India about foreign universities being able to set up campuses. So there is an explicit statement that universities in top 100 rankings. Now it doesn't specify how those, but maybe whether they use the Times Higher Education or some other form of ranking. There is this notion that top universities of the world can set up campus. Now it is qualified, and I should say, by this fine print, which says that regulation to set that up will be put in place, right? So one shouldn't assume that the policy document has opened the floodgates and we will have campuses of foreign universities in the next year. There is a lot of fine print there which says that regulation to set up these campuses will be put in place, and in India to navigate regulation is sometimes not easy. So I would caution that I'm not likely to see a foreign university campus being opened in India in the next 2-3 years. In 5 years, maybe yes, if regulation happens. In 10 years, most likely, right? So in the 5 to 10 year period, maybe there are some foreign university campuses in India, unlikely to happen in the next 2-3 years, or even maybe 5 years, unless the government really moves with speed on regulation, because the regulation piece really needs to be tackled there. But again, a huge, I think a great ambition on internationalization, and I think something that universities all over can look forward to. So that was the third one. The fourth, I think I should talk about, is really on the vision about research. It talks about the formation of the National Research Foundation. India's spend on research is 0.69% of GDP. It's far less than any developed country, whether it's the US or Korea, even countries like Korea, etc. So it's hugely ambitious. While India has done a great job in higher education, in some of our higher educational institutions greatly produce high quality students and faculty, but India has not done as much a great job on research, right? And that's why you see some of the Indian institutions don't figure in top 200, top 500 of world rankings, because a lot of those rankings weigh research very, very heavily while deciding rankings. So there's a huge impetus to really push research. I regard that as a sort of a key focus and a key area of direction. And I think lastly, the fifth one I would speak of in higher education is this movement towards decontrol. There is talk of a single regulator in India. Again, there's been a lot of criticism of over-regulation. So one higher education body which really regulates, which sets frameworks, which accredited. So I think it's the idea, and how much of that happens again will lie in fine print. What the constitution of this new higher education commission is, what are its statutes. So there is a lot of fine print, I should say, and a lot will depend on how this policy unfolds and is implemented in the next 2 years. But yes, I think what it promises is it's put education right up center and foremost as an agenda item of the government. It's a statement of intent. I personally believe if the government is able to implement even half of what is written in the policy, India in school education and higher education will be a very, very different place. So I'll stop here on this answer, Swaraj, and happy to.
No, you're absolutely right, Vineet. It is so much to take in, and I personally think it is really bold and ambitious. So that's great, and thanks for giving us your top 5. The thing is, as a higher educator in the country, there were multiple things that you pointed out. How things are going to change. Realistically, how do you think over the next 5 to 10 years we are going to see the higher education landscape transform? So for that student who's coming in from that school side, how from your perspective, how is that going to change? The higher education landscape specifically, which are going to be the big changes that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think first, Suraj, for the first thing definitely is that as learning outcomes improve. So let me also put some time horizons. Let's say there is a short term, which I would say is like a 2 to 5 year horizon. There is a medium term, 5 to 15, and there is a long term, 15 plus. You know, maybe not that much will happen in the short term, right? But in the medium term, I do see as learning outcomes improve, more and more people will want to go to college. And this is the stated goal also of the government, that the gross enrollment ratio in higher education needs to improve. So I think whether more students then move internationally, you know, India's economic GDP is also growing. The growth rates, of course, leaving out this year, have been upwards of 7%. So people will want access to better quality higher education. Now, whether those institutions get created in India or whether more and more students move outside, I do feel in the short to medium term, till that capacity gets created in India, the number of students going from India for higher education will increase. And in the medium term, 5 to 15, I see this increase to be more exponential. And of course, we are all sort of interpreting data and making our own judgments, but that's my one judgment. I feel the capacity expansion of higher educational institutions in India will increase exponentially. The Ashoka universities of the world, Kriya, Plaksha, which I'm now involved in setting, there are going to be many more institutions of this nature that will come up, which are multidisciplinary, broad-based liberal arts education in liberal arts, sciences, professional education, blending together. So it's going to be a good laboratory for experimentation in higher education. I mean, there are not too many places in the world where new universities are opening. In fact, in a lot of the Western world, they are in fact closing. So India is going to be a place for experimentation in higher education, for new trends coming in. So it's an exciting place to be, especially for somebody like me who's setting up institutions, for universities globally who are looking at India, right? Assuming the regulation comes up in a good manner, I think it's a great place to come and do business and set up campuses and for education. So I see that emerging as a trend. I see the use of technology being enhanced greatly. The policy is very progressive on the use of technology in education. And I think with the sort of numbers India has, I don't think physical campuses alone can solve the numbers challenge. So technology will increasingly play a huge part. And there again, I think there is an opportunity for international universities to leverage technology. I think more than pre-recorded classes, I feel at least in the short term of 2 to 5 years, classes which are taught live by faculty from overseas, there is opportunity for those sort of products to teach students in a live manner, because that definitely drives more engagement than the pre-recorded format. There are opportunities for international campuses to come set up centers, to do a lot of joint summer exchanges, semester exchanges, any sort of research collaborations. I think the opportunity for all that increases tremendously. So I think those are some of the ways I think in 15 years, in the long run, I do feel the government's vision of India becoming the Vishwa Guru, perhaps some of that may start to, if everything goes well. I'm a diehard optimist. I don't see that happening in the next 5 to 15 years. But in the long run, post 15 years, some of that may start to happen, that India does start attracting a lot of students from outside. But that is contingent that we are able to build great institutions. So that shift may happen only in the long run.
Great. And Vineet, you already touched upon this, but I do want to get a little deeper into it, because the policy specifically just mentions the top 100. And again, it doesn't outline, how it will define the top 100. But if you are a university who is not in the top 100, whether it's Times Higher or QS, and you want to increase that engagement, keeping this new policy in mind, what would be the areas? You touched upon the research collaborations. You did touch upon the exchanges. What else do you think you could start working towards as an international university in your work with India?
I think I've always believed, and it's not happened as fast as it should have happened. And I think there is work to be done on both sides. But I think one of the opportunities I feel is really in the pathway programs, or in the, for example, students doing 2 years in India and 2 years outside, right? Or in master's programs, students doing like 8 months here and 8 months there. I think those sort of, for any university internationally, those opportunities are probably in the short term, in the 3 to 7 years, are really the opportunities to look for. And whoever moves first, the early mover advantage, will have benefit, in my sense. I think those opportunities, other than the usual opportunities which exist of Indian students going and studying abroad, I feel this is as a tangible opportunity. I think this is what I see. And of course, I think there is great opportunity for summer programs, for high quality short duration programs, for professional education programs, right? I think there is great demand in India right now for continuous education. In a 3 month, 6 month, in an online, great content, great degree, offline sort of format. I think there is, and these programs may not be degree programs. I think there's great opportunity for that. So those are the 2-3 areas I feel, even for universities. And by the way, this top 100, as I said, I think this needs to be watched carefully on what the regulation will be. In my mind, this is going to be far more difficult than it seems. So one should watch and wait on how this will unfold.
Since we were on that, how international universities will engage, I did get a question separately, so I will ask that because I think it's relevant, which is, how can international universities right now change the perceptions about online education and create synergies around that in India? Because many large universities in the US have made online education a big priority, but I think it's still not massive adoption. How do you see that change, or what could they be doing to change that in the near to medium term?
Right. No, it's a great question, and I think my reaction is in two, three ways. I think one is, for students who go from India to study abroad, the package is not just education. The package is also the prospect of being able to at least work there for a little while and get exposure to a top quality work environment. So in some sense, the opportunity for an Indian student who goes abroad to study is that she will probably not only get a great education, but perhaps also can build a great career, right? Now, the online education model sort of stops at the great education piece, because the opportunities are in India. But having said that, what I am finding, and we are doing this increasingly at Plaksha and Ashoka, the in-person teaching, if it's done remotely, rather than pre-recorded lectures, the in-person teaching is building, and now with all the platforms that exist, and if one can build in really time with the teacher, right? I think the in-person teaching format of online teaching rather than pre-recorded, in my mind at least, will have better traction in India in the next 2 to 5 years. One can't really predict beyond that. So that's one. I would strongly recommend universities to really look at in-person teaching, long distance, build engagement, because I think the power of a teacher to mentor, to inspire, to really connect with students, I know it doesn't happen as much in the virtual world, but I think that has tremendous power. So those models, if universities bring in those models, they will be greatly enhanced. Even for the pre-recorded sort of MOOCs model, if it can be blended with a lot of live interaction, I think that to me can build in better traction. And perhaps then in the end, you could have like, okay, a 6-month online module and a 3-month physical. So if you can blend it a little bit with physical module, or maybe a week after 3 months or something, I think those models will also have appeal, because students are looking at exposure and opportunity to travel. Of course, right now things are closed with the due to COVID, but at some point that will open up.
Great.
Those would be my 3 recommendations. And of course, on the pre-recorded side, I think there's an opportunity to build. I'm still a believer in great content. So I think if content can be built which is extremely attractive, there's an opportunity in the online play as well.
Great. Thanks, Vineet. Vineet, you also spoke about the fact that we built some great single stream educational institutions like the IITs, the IIMs, and now the whole focus on shifting to the multidisciplinary approach for even those institutions. How do you really see that happening? And could you put a timeline to how we will move in that direction?
So it's a difficult question, Swaraj. I think the need to move is imminent, right? I mean, there is no question about that. Right? Especially, I mean, since you took the example of the IITs, if engineering is really the application of science to solve real problems, then problems are really becoming multidisciplinary, and you need all perspectives, the humanities perspective, the social science perspective, to really benefit engineering education. So I don't think even if IITs want to concentrate on engineering, they can't work on the current format. I think the question is really going to be, IIT still there are 1.3 million people competing for 10,000 seats. So there is huge, there is huge scarcity for that quality of education. So the question is going to be who can push the IITs, right? How do they feel the need to change? So I think it will be again the Ashokas and the Plakshas which will create that pressure, and not that 1 or 2 institutions can, but I think it will be 7, 8, 10 institutions that will push the boundaries. Not that the IITs won't change themselves, they will, but having been part of one such institution, having studied there, I know the speed of change is terribly slow, right? And the impetus to change is terribly slow unless they are pushed. So I think some amount of pushing will happen. It's a difficult question to answer. I again feel I'm not optimistic that there'll be too much change in the next 2, 3 years, 4 years. I see some change in 5, 10 years, but I think the major reform, it will take 7, 8, 10 years to start seeing, to really start seeing how this education policy is looking on the ground, and to really see its true benefits.
Great. Now we need, we'll start taking some questions from the audience, soon. But I wanted to really get your opinion on the whole. There's a section about teacher training in the policy, and we know that some of the leading higher education institutions in the country are still struggling with faculty shortages, good faculty shortages, with literally doubling of capacity, and moving from the current way of doing things to retraining, and how do you see that evolving? How do we create the capacity for the teachers? If we have to go 30:1 student to teacher ratio at a national level, how do you see that evolving over the next few years?
Well, that's again a tough question, Swaraj, and I think, and to me, I think that is perhaps the biggest challenge. Even if Indian entrepreneurs set up infrastructure, create campuses, or build capacity, or we create, I think the answer has to lie both in creating capacity to train teachers, but also in technology. And I think that's where technology will play such an important role. And I made that comment early on that I see very little hope of this 50% gross enrollment ratio, forget 15 years, but even being met in 20 years if technology doesn't play an important role. So even to this question that was asked before, that's where whole online, pre-recorded, and live delivery will matter so much. And that's again another place I think India could leverage a lot of faculty all over the world who can teach remotely, right? So enhancing really not only student teaching but really teacher training capacity, that has to happen, and technology will play a huge part. I don't see it happening without that.
Okay. We also have a couple more questions from the audience. One is specifically talking about the acceptability of online courses at the master's degree level, especially from international institutions. Would you be able to share? I know you've already addressed the online bit, but this question was specifically at a master's level. Do you think people would be open to, to that?
Well, I think so. I think in the online master's courses, I do believe they are going to be intrinsically linked to employment, right? And if there are courses which can establish correlation, that these courses and these degrees enhance career prospects, right? Then I think the viability of these courses will increase, and which takes me back to my earlier point that a bulk of the delivery could be online of even these master's programs. But for these institutions to have some on the ground presence in India, they need not open up a full campus, but having some presence here or some tie-up here with a local partner, right? That ensures that these students not only complete this online master's degree, but have access to good opportunities. I think that model is really waiting to explode in India, right? High quality content, high quality courses, backed up by on the ground high career prospects. So a pure play online where you teach and go away, that will have some merit. But increasingly a lot of content is also democratized, and it's available at very economical cost. So if one has to really monetize it and one has to capture a larger share of the market, then I think online play with some sort of physical presence in India, or some partners in India, I would think is a good way to go.
Great, and you touched upon the job and the career prospects bit. I have a question from Arvind Vepa, specifically saying, how do you think the job market will react to the new generations of students emerging from multidisciplinary backgrounds? And I think, as someone who has seen that on the Ashoka side, there's probably no better person to answer that question in the country.
Yeah. So, no, again, a great question, and I would qualify it in two parts. There is a market for specialized job. Now, if you need a data scientist, you need a data scientist. If you need a programmer, you need a programmer. If you need a dentist, you need a dentist. Nobody else can do that job, right? So my sense is those are 50% of the jobs, or maybe 40%. The other 60% jobs are, you need an analyst, you need somebody to do internet marketing, you need a program manager. So these jobs I would qualify in the category of generalists, right? Where it doesn't matter what degree you've done, as long as you can think critically, you can connect the dots, you can analyze well, you are driven, motivated, you have the right attitude, a lot of people can do well, irrespective of what degree you've studied, right? And I think that's where the broad-based liberal arts education is helping, and that's been our experience at Ashoka. So the multidisciplinary broad-based education at the undergraduate level does help fill in a lot of those spots. And we are finding that Ashoka graduates with a broad-based liberal arts education are actually doing better in these jobs than engineers also, who've gone through a 4-year professional education. Now, in the specialized jobs, you of course need specialization. So, and a lot of job growth is happening there too. So, India will need many more programmers. India will need many more data scientists. Equally, India will need many more people who can work in the area of sustainable energy, in the area of new emerging technologies. Similarly, India will need a lot of people who can read well, who can write well. So I think there is opportunity on both sides, on the broad-based multidisciplinary side and the specialized professional degrees, if I may say. But I think the advantage of the multidisciplinary approach is that you also get a programmer who can read well, write well, and understands the world better. You can get a data scientist who can rise above the narrow domain of data science and think about the problems of the world in a far more holistic manner. So I think even for those people, the multidisciplinary education is more holistic, creates better professionals, create better individuals, and individuals who can sort of shift quickly from one role to another. So I think it benefits both ways. So I am a believer in that model.
Great. We do have another couple of questions, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to get very quickly to them. One speaks about, from Patrick, it's talking about the Indian exam boards, and do you think they will test differently? If so, how will additional exam boards come into existence?
Well, I think that again remains to be seen. What one sees in the policy is that there is a move to standardize, there is a move to move away from rote learning. And one of the challenges of rote learning has been in the learning outcomes that you see. So I think how we test after grade 2, of how we test after grade 5, or how we test after grade 8, or how we test after grade 12 will change at each grade. I don't anticipate too much change after grade 12, but I do think that grade 3, grade 5, grade 2, grade 5, grade 8, those assessments are going to be extremely meaningful, and they are going to be extremely important because that's where the failure points are. Grade 5 is big failure. Students are finishing grade 5 and then still not able to do basic math. So I think those assessments are going to be very, very critical for India, and they will really create the pipeline for students to go further into secondary school and to go to higher education. The policy does not talk about doing away with the 60 odd boards that we have in the country. So that I'm not anticipating may change. Education in India is on the concurrent list of the Indian Constitution, which means both the federal government and individual state governments can legislate. And that's why you see this complex web of boards and different sort of systems. Added to that is the complexity that each state has a different language. So, and states are extremely protective about their language and their way of teaching. So the federal structure of education is not like it's a big political issue. So that's not going to change, which means state boards are not going to go away. But I think at the national level, there may be some effort to have uniform standardization, uniform learning outcomes. That may happen, but I think the individual state boards are likely to stay, if that was the question. And some of that ambiguity and testing will continue, is my sense.
Great. In the interest of, we'll take one more question here, which is from Northeastern, which basically specifically talks about affordability with more private universities coming up, foreign universities coming in. How do you think that will play out, given that, where the state funded or the public universities are very, very affordable? How do you see, there are some things in the policy that talk about fee capping, but, if you could share your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think the policy does talk a fair bit about scholarships, about financial aid. And, again, this is a great question on how this will play out. I do feel India, at least today, and I don't know what it will be after 15 years when the higher education market is more saturated. But I think today, even at the undergraduate level, there are almost 100,000 students going out from India to various countries, right? And they are spending far in excess of anything that any Indian university is charging. Ashoka, which is also for somebody who comes without scholarship, is at about a $10,000 price point. And if students are going outside, they are spending anything upwards of $40,000, $50,000 per year, right? So I think there is still a huge market at different price points. Of course, it cannot be at the comparative price points that a university can charge in their own country. But there is still a huge market at reasonably higher price points, if that is the question. Now, that may change dramatically in 15 years after more capacity gets created. But I do believe that quality in the long run is going to matter. You know, Indians, the Indian parent, the Indian student, they invest a lot in higher education. And if they believe that this particular institution or this university offers high quality education and is even charging a little bit extra, students do flock to those institutions. So I think that should help any university or any institution thinking about India. What I should mention is that whenever you think about India, think about bringing your latest programs and the most contemporary and the best in class education, because that will get differentiated. You know, if universities were to bring in their best in class, the best faculty, most contemporary programs, and find a way to deliver them at reasonable cost, perhaps not the cost you would charge in the United States, but comparable to any top private university in India, I think there is a market. How that may change after 15 years, I can't say, but I don't think that that is going away in the next 15 years for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Vineet. You know, that was the last question we take, because Vineet has already sacrificed his dinner time, you know, for us today. Thanks so much for staying up late and taking all the questions here. You know, it's great. You know, the policy obviously is a step in the right direction. The proof will be visible, as you say, in the next 10 to 15 years as these things really get implemented. And hopefully, as you said, you know, technology is going to play a major role. I believe the institutions that you have established over the years, Ashoka and now recently Plaksha, are going to again play an amazing role in that, you know, and you recognize that. And, you know, Plaksha is already working on all those technology solutions. So thanks again, Vineet, for joining us this evening. And I'm just going to share, you know, the last slide, which has you know, if you need a copy of the presentation, you can just write to us at info@univAssist.com, and one of my colleagues will be able to get you that. Again, Vineet, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for joining us today and taking all the questions.
Thanks, Swaraj. Thank you for inviting me, and a pleasure to be able to speak to all of you.
Yeah, thanks. And I wanted to again add, you know, the people stayed for the entire hour, so I really wanted to thank all of you for joining and for all of your questions. Thank you, and we'll keep bringing you such great conversations in the future. Thanks. Have a great day.